Welcome back to TRT World. Our top stories. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has confirmed Ankara has shared recordings of Jamal Khashoggi's killing with the governments of the US, the UK, France and Germany. He also says Riyadh certainly knows who was in the 15-member team that killed the Saudi journalist inside the country's consulate in Istanbul on October the 2nd. US President Donald Trump says he wants a strong Europe that can share the defense burden with his country. His comments come after he blasted the French President Emmanuel Macron when Macron suggested Europe needs its own army to confront threats from Russia, China and the US. Trump says that was very insulting. They're meeting just before the 100th anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I. Well, let's speak to Michael Hughes, who's a professor of history at Lancaster University in the United Kingdom. Michael joins us now live from the United Kingdom. Every network in the world, Michael, as you know, is looking at this 100th anniversary of the end of the war that they call the Great War. When you think about it, what are the first things that come to your mind?
Well, I think what comes to mind in the first place is the slaughter on the Western Front, the trenches, gas and anguish. But I think in some ways that's, if not a misleading image, it doesn't capture the whole story. It's an image of the war that's very focused on what happened in a small part of France and Belgium. It misses the fact this was a world war, that millions were caught up in it, millions died from Europe through the Middle East, millions more died across parts of Asia. So it was truly a great war in the worst sense of that term. It was great not in the sense that it was wonderful, it was great in the sense that it was horrible.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned people who weren't European who were involved in the fighting, most of which was, of course, around mainland Europe. Emmanuel Macron, a few days ago, during this long tour that he's doing leading up to Sunday's events in Paris, he went to one which commemorated the role of African fighters. And then you have the fighters who come from my part of the world, from the subcontinent, all those Hindus, Muslims who came from what was then British India. Can you tell us a bit about the contribution that those who weren't European made to the war?
Well, the contribution was immense, and it's a contribution that was largely ignored at the time and has largely been forgotten since. As you say, millions of troops came from Africa, came from the subcontinent. Many of them fought, many of them were involved in heavy labour, doing the essential work of digging trenches. They were involved in all the kind of infrastructure of war. Without them, it's certain, I think, that the European powers would not have won the war. Their contribution was absolutely invaluable.
And when we look back now at the Treaty of Versailles, it's pretty much accepted, is it not, that it was a problem. It placed too much of a burden on Germany, and that eventually laid the seeds for the Second World War. How could Versailles have been different and therefore World War II possibly avoided?
I don't think it could have been different. You have to understand the anguish, the anger after 4 years of fighting meant there was a determination to keep Germany down, to crush Germany from ever again launching war on the world. Now, in retrospect, we know, of course, that led to huge anger in Germany. It fed into the rise of Nazism. It's striking, actually, when France surrendered in 1940, that Hitler insisted that the French surrender in the same place where Germany signed the armistice in the First World War. So Versailles had an awful legacy, but could it have been different? I doubt it, given the anger at the time.
What about then the rise of fascism, which again is attributed to the rigidity, shall we call it, of the Versailles Treaty and the world as it is today? It wasn't long, of course, after the end of World War I that World War II was underway. And some people draw a parallel between what's happening around much of the world today and the politics of the world just before World War II.
It's extremely worrying. Leaders like Macron and Merkel are intensely worried about the rise of nationalism. You would like to think that we learn from the past. The past never repeats itself absolutely, but it does sometimes rhyme, if I can put it that way, as someone once said. And I think the concern today is that we look at the rise of nationalism, we look at the growth of international tension, and whilst it's a very different world from the First World War, you have to worry that some of the same kind of hatreds, some of the same kind of enmities might explode, probably not in a world war, but in patterns of conflict that could make the world a much more dangerous place.
Michael, we really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Michael Hughes joining us on TRT World from the University of Lancaster.